It looked unreal, almost like a scene from a dream. Lewis Hamilton in scarlet red, flying down Monza's long straights, the crowd roaring as if the past had collided with the present. The sound of the tifosi rose like thunder when the timing screens lit up, showing Hamilton at the very top, Ferrari in first place at their home track, and not just first, but with a lap so sharp it felt like a seismic shift in the paddock. The headlines wrote themselves. It was shocking, game-changing, the kind of performance that makes even veterans of the sport stop and take notice. Yet while the grandstands erupted in pure joy, those who know racing best felt something different. They felt the silence. When Hamilton crossed the line, his radio stayed cold. No cheers, no celebration, no engineer's voice confirming what everyone else could see. Just silence. And that silence was louder than the cheers outside because it was not the silence of disbelief. It was the silence of calculation. To the outside world, it looked like Ferrari had finally landed the perfect start. But to those on the inside, it was clear. This was not just about speed. It was about something far more dangerous. It was about control, and it was a move that Charles Leclerc never expected. On paper, it looked perfect. Ferrari locking out the top 2 places, the fans in pure ecstasy, red flags waving as if victory had already been sealed. To the world outside the garage, this was dominance, a dream start, a united front. But peel back the surface and the picture changes. The radio silence after Hamilton's lap was no accident. The engineers were not celebrating, they were calculating. It was a cold silence, the kind that hides more than it shows, because what Hamilton had just done was not part of the plan. Insiders revealed that his lap came with a torque map that Ferrari had already rejected. It was a controversial setup one his own engineer fought to keep alive, and Hamilton had chosen to use it anyway. That was not just bravery. It was calculated defiance. While the crowd believed they were watching Ferrari at their strongest, the truth inside the garage was far more unsettling. This was not simply a driver finding speed. This was Hamilton bending Ferrari to his will, running his own program inside a team famous for hierarchy. And in a place like Maranello, that kind of undercover rebellion does not go unnoticed. Hamilton's lap was more than just physics and precision. It was politics played out on the track. Behind that one blazing time was a quiet struggle inside Ferrari, a struggle most fans could not see. His engineer, Riccardo Adami, had become more than just a voice on the radio. He was acting as a shield, a firewall between Hamilton and the layers of Ferrari management. Adami was quietly pushing through setups that were never meant to be approved, executing decisions that bypassed the traditional chain of command. Every tenth of a second Hamilton gained was not only speed, it was rebellion with data. And in a team where structure and order had always ruled, that kind of defiance created an ideological fracture. Some inside Ferrari saw it as necessary evolution, others as a dangerous civil war brewing in the shadows. For Charles Leclerc, it was more personal. This was the first time he was not setting the technical direction of the car. He was no longer the reference point, no longer the driver the team followed. Instead, he found himself reacting to Hamilton's choices, forced to measure himself against a new order forming right in front of him. But just as Hamilton's surge began to reshape the order inside Ferrari, the system pushed back. News broke of a penalty, a 5-place grid drop that landed with suspicious timing. The alleged infraction had nothing to do with Monza. It came from a moment far away, a procedural violation buried in telemetry that no one inside the Ferrari garage had even been warned about. To some, it looked like coincidence, but to those watching closely, it felt like external resistance, maybe even strategic sabotage. The message was clear. Every time Hamilton built momentum, forces outside and inside the team would try to slow him down, yet his response was not frustration. In the second practice session, running with a heavier program, he still placed inside the top 5. And when he faced the cameras afterward, his words cut through the noise. The car was better today. It'll be even better tomorrow because I'll make the changes tonight. That was not the voice of hope. It was the voice of defiance. Hamilton knew the penalty was real, but so was the opportunity. Ferrari expected emotion. Instead, what they got was clarity. Leclerc's numbers on the timing sheets looked respectable, but the tone around him told a different story. His results were solid, yet cautious. The kind of performances that kept him near the front without ever setting the pace. In the garage, his presence seemed almost detached, his focus drawn inward while Hamilton's influence grew louder. His setup choices were conservative, safe enough to protect consistency, but never bold enough to change the game. When he spoke after the sessions, he described the car as tricky but fast, words that hinted more at uncertainty than control. For the first time in his Ferrari career, Leclerc was no longer the one dictating the technical direction. He was reacting, not leading, and that shift carried weight. Behind closed doors, he asked for an extended simulation run, a move that seemed less about preparing for Saturday and more about watching Hamilton's baseline. It felt less like strategy and more like surveillance, as if even Leclerc himself sensed the balance of power slipping from his hands. Friday made the split inside Ferrari impossible to ignore. In the first practice, Hamilton's aggressive setup delivered dominance, his car sharper and more responsive than anyone expected. By the second practice, Ferrari tried to pull things back toward balance, dialing the car into a safer middle ground, but the result was obvious. The pace dropped, the stability faded, and the garage began to feel uneasy. What had started as a united front now looked like a divided garage. Engineers and analysts began to gravitate toward two different camps. On one side was Leclerc's group, rooted in tradition, stability, and the hierarchy that had always defined Ferrari. On the other side was Hamilton's circle, driven by precision, raw data, and a willingness to break from the old way of doing things. It was a splintering hierarchy, an internal reshuffle that grew louder with every lap. Some whispered that Ferrari had not seen a fracture this deep since the resignations of 2019. And while the outside world saw two red cars at the front, those inside knew the truth. The team was no longer fighting only their rivals. They were beginning to fight themselves. Riccardo Adami's role in all of this was never supposed to be so powerful. He was not even meant to be Hamilton's engineer at Ferrari. His reassignment was intended as a gesture of experience, a way to ease the transition of a seven-time champion into a team known for its strict traditions. But what began as integration quickly became something far more dangerous for the balance inside Maranello. Adami turned into Hamilton's greatest weapon. He became the enabler, the one who allowed unfiltered execution of ideas that the hierarchy would normally block. It was Adami who approved the controversial torque mapping outside the original plan, and the results spoke louder than any argument. Each decision he backed gave Hamilton more leverage, and each successful lap pushed the boundaries of Ferrari's control. In silence and without fuss, Adami was quietly reshaping the internal power flow of the team, turning what should have been a controlled adaptation into a dangerous loyalty that was already changing Ferrari from the inside. Hamilton's lap was more than a statement of speed. It was a reset of Ferrari's balance of power. Every bit of feedback he gave started to carry new weight, and what was once considered a suggestion was now becoming policy. His data runs began shaping the priorities of the simulation team, forcing the garage to adjust around his approach rather than the other way around. It was as if Hamilton was redefining Ferrari in real time, rewriting the hierarchy from the inside out, dragging the team forward whether everyone agreed or not. For Leclerc, this was the hardest part to watch. The role he once owned was slipping away, not because of politics alone, but because the numbers on the screen backed Hamilton's methods. The authority that had been his by default was no longer guaranteed. For the first time, Ferrari was not just racing for victory, it was racing for its identity. From the outside, Ferrari looked stronger than ever. The Italian media celebrated a return to form, praising the team for putting both cars at the sharp end of the grid. To the world, it was a picture of unity, the red team rising again at its home race. But inside the garage, the truth was very different. What looked like harmony was in fact fragmentation, a quiet war unfolding between two camps. On one side stood Leclerc's circle, defending tradition, stability, and the hierarchy that had defined Ferrari for decades. On the other side was Hamilton's growing influence, precision-focused, data-driven, and unafraid to break the old rules. Monza had become more than just a race. It was a battleground, a fork in the road where Ferrari had to choose between its past and its future. The risk was clear: follow the old path and risk collapse, or embrace the new order and be reborn. And as the pressure built, the realization grew stronger. Monza was no longer Ferrari's home race. It was ground zero for a takeover. What happens next is the question hanging over the whole paddock. If Hamilton's setups carry him through qualifying and then again on Sunday, the effect will be seismic. Ferrari will never look the same. The cracks already forming in the walls of Maranello will widen into something irreversible, an internal shift that no penalty or politics can undo. It is no longer just a battle of drivers. It is past versus future, tradition against transformation, hierarchy challenged by precision. Every lap Hamilton completes with his own program strengthens the argument that the old way cannot survive. And every time Leclerc tries to respond, the gap in influence becomes clearer. The weekend at Monza has become more than points, more than pride, more than a homecoming. It has become a choice, because this weekend isn't just about P1. It's about whether Ferrari chooses its past or its future.